Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's fourth in a series of webinars on making real-time supply chain risk decisions focused on building your resilient enterprise. And this week, we will talk about what you can do now. This is a very exciting webinar. We'll share with you 12 different areas what you can do now. Also, keep in mind, we have our supply chain management readiness assessment that's available online for you to take. Please feel free to take that free assessment at any time. Again, we appreciate you taking the time today to attend today's webinar on building an evolving resilient enterprise and providing to you what you can do today. And we hope that your family are healthy and safe. And just as a recap of our recent webinar series, this is the fourth in the webinar series. We had a webinar last November in strategic geopolitical risks. Then we had a webinar on linking finance and supply chain worlds. And then recently in March had mitigating geopolitical risks at the tactical and operational levels. All these webinars can be found on the web and in our website at the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. Next month, we'll be getting into creating growth in your company while leveraging the risk landscape. Again, welcome to the webinar. Please do join the chat and also join the poll EV that was in the poll everywhere link in the chat. Please join poll EV for the polling questions. Your feedback throughout the webinar and after the webinar is greatly appreciated. My name is Jim DeVries. I'm the president of Enhance International Group, and I will be the host of today's webinar. We also have Connor Fitcham from South Africa, who will be helping us facilitate today's webinar. The Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium has been delivering education, webinars, workshops, and consulting, focusing on supply chain risk and resiliency for the past 15 years. Joining us is Greg Schlegel. Greg, a few words of introduction.
Greetings all. Thanks for attending. I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. As Jim mentioned, we've been in the biz of risk for about 15 years. I've taught supply chain risk at Lehigh University for 10 years. That was a great run. Teach ERM, which we're not going to talk about today, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova here in the States as well. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain exec consultant. Perhaps like many of you, I spent 30 years as a career as a supply chain exec across a couple Fortune 100 manufacturers. I've taught supply chain management at 6 different universities here in the States, and ultimately ended up as president of the Apex organization, now known as ASCM. So back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And a little bit of my background. My core belief is that success starts with discovering our untapped potential of our employees, from the leadership down to the shop floor, including the suppliers and the customers, and even the stockholders. We live in an ecosystem. It is in developing others that we excel at building that resilient enterprise. So what we've built in Enhance International Group is a group of companies, 50 plus companies that focus on that. For the past 30 years, as a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt and now a Master Integrator for supply chain transformations, and former executive in a number of Fortune 500 companies. With that, we'll go to our overview today and our deliverables. First, we're going to get an update on the current supply chain risks. What is the world out there looking like? Then we'll get into the 12 things that you can do now. And then we'll get into applicable case studies as we go through those 12 areas that you can take action now. And then we'll look at building a roadmap to your success with some financial alignment. With that, Greg, a little bit overview.
You bet. We mentioned the consortium. We're 32 companies at the moment, about 1,700 supply chain risk pros around the globe. We operate in 23 countries. On the right-hand side, we broke our products and services into 3 pillars. You can see them. In the middle is education. We do a lot of workshops. We do a lot of webinars all around the globe. We have a host of folks who can coach and consult. And on the right-hand side, we are blessed with several of the top hitters from a supply chain risk point of view, cloud-based tools to do the heavy lifting to support your supply chain risk and resiliency journey. On the left are our 5 product areas. We have 2 online certificate courses. One is a basic supply chain risk and resilience, mainly for manufacturers. The other is geared specifically towards public healthcare supply chains. As you can get a certificate, it's self-paced and so forth. We have 2 online assessment tools. We're going to talk about the one which is supply chain management online readiness. That evaluates your supply chain process maturity and gives you inherent risk. It's a good starter. Jim mentioned it. It's free. We'll dig into it a little bit more later in the session. We have a brand new online assessment, which is pure risk associated with what is your risk maturity level, what's your risk appetite, and what's your risk culture, with an action plan, and it uses some AI ML algorithms. Again, we coach and we consult on journeys in supply chain risk and resiliency, and we mentioned we have some pretty heady, pretty comprehensive supply chain risk and resiliency cloud-based platform solutions. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And a little bit of overview on Enhance International Group. Again, I serve as the master integrator for the 50 plus consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers, focus on enabling your enterprise. Again, I serve as that master integrator to give you access to the best and brightest companies. Synergistically, our team is dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce by leveraging EIG's partner tenured expertise. We provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining positive margin growth. The competitive advantage, focusing on 90 days. So we're really focused on getting in and out and empowering your organization to be all that it can be. Reviewing this bicycle slide, we break it up into strategy and execution. Again, strategy, what's your vision, your brand, intrinsic value of your company, and execution, bringing visibility and operational excellence in enterprise risk and resiliency into your everyday working life of your organization. Today, we're going to be focused on tactical and operational actions that you can perform to drive your supply chain risk and resiliency as a priority in your company. And we look at the bicycle slide. Life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving. So we're going to keep moving here and cover the agenda here, the actions that can take now, a webinar. So we're going to focus with initially on what are some common supply chain risks that we're all encountering. We pulled ChatGPT to get that information. Then we're going to get into what you can do now, and included in that, those different tools that we're going to be showing you. We're going to show you some case studies also. And then we'll extract some valuable takeaways as far as how does it hit your bottom line and a roadmap. With that, just want to look at what are the supply chain risks that are happening out there. We look forward to any feedback you have on these risks and what you're seeing. Please enter in the poll EV, and we'll come right back to that in a second. These are the top risks that ChatGPT are seeing. Of course, the geopolitical instability. It seems to be escalating every single day. That's driving a lot of economic instability. These things are coupled in some ways. Their cyber threats are coming in. Of course, we talked about the weather, people are seeing changes in weather patterns that they've never seen before. Supplier concentration risk is also a challenge as we move from uh, as we move sources of supply, and we have more geopolitical risks. That's a bigger challenge. Regulatory changes, de deregulate, regulate, that going through that seesaw effect across the globe and the effect that it has. Of course, there's transportation vulnerabilities as the bridge incident recent here in the U.S. Good news is they're opening up that bridge, that waterway to allow most of those ships in the next few days, about a month after that bridge collapse. And of course, the labor challenges are forever an issue here in the U.S. So, Greg, your thoughts?
I think GPT got it pretty good there. There's always enough risks, folks, out there in the supply chain. That's why the profession is so dynamic. So we're gonna try to give you as much insight, tactical insight, in terms of how to maybe identify, assess, and mitigate some of these supply chain risks today.
So, and the Pull EV, if you have any ideas, please enter them in there. We'll hit this in a few minutes again. Some of the ones that in there about the indecisions as far as making a decision of whether to stay or go. Do we produce? Do we not produce? There's a lot of stagnation in overall in the supply demand area. Civil unrest, and that's around the world, and economic uncertainty. We all are feeling that. So with that, we'll go into the JEP Global Supply Chain Volatility Index, and this is JEP was founded in 1999. They have over 6,000 global employees, and this is produced on a monthly basis, and it covers over 27,000 countries, companies in 40 countries around the world. So this is a global index. Pretty nice that they share this with the world on their website. So we certainly thank them for that. There are 6 variables that are driving this, that drive it. JP Morgan Global Quantity of Purchases Index, All Items Supply Shortages Indicator, Transportation Price Pressures Indicator, and Manufacturing PMI Comments Tracker, staff shortages, and item shortages. So they really do an excellent job of putting this together. And you can look at what's happening with demand, transport cost, item shortages, stockpiling, backlogs. And if you're above, you're stretched. And if you're below, you have excess capacity and short. So with that, Greg, I know you have some thoughts on that you wanted to share right away. I'll hand it
Yeah,
to you.
sure. I will say, what a difference a year makes, folks, huh?
Yeah.
From from March of 2023 to March of 2024. We were just talking, Jim and I, this is somewhat of an indicator of the bullwhip effect. We're not talking about the bullwhip effect today, but it gives you a sense of being stretched or having underutilized capacity across the entire supply chain. So the net from what we see here, which we called it back in the pandemic days, the bullwhip effect is essentially, it's not completely done, but the amplitude of demand and supply bullwhip has probably diminished pretty well across all industries. I think that's what the index is telling us right now.
Thanks, Greg. Very insightful. With that, Greg.
You bet. We wanted to start to get you grounded again just on a classic supply chain planning time horizon. We don't know your level of experience, where you've been, what you do. So we just thought we'd get you grounded real quick on supply chain planning 101. All right, let's take a look at it. Left to right, we'll just talk a little bit about the time horizons as we know them when we get certified in supply chain. On the left-hand side, strategic planning. You guys can take a look at the elements that are exercised within strategic planning. What we want to get across to you is down on the bottom, the time frame. When you're doing strategic planning in supply chain, you look out into the future 1 to 5 years. The next, as we move left to right, is tactical planning. And if you're in supply chain, you can identify with those basic elements, including maybe MRP, material requirements planning, even SNOP, sales and operations planning in this arena, and look at the time frame on the bottom. You're looking out 1 to 18 months. Then in the middle, operation planning. In the blue box, a little levity here, we call it, this is where the scheduling miracle happens every day. If you're in production scheduling, demand planning, and so forth, little levity here, but take a look at the operational time frame in that blue box of scheduling. It's anywhere from 0 to 30 days if you're manufacturing. Also, from a make point of view, if you manufacture, on the floor, there's something called normally an MES, Manufacturing Execution System. And that is really, look at the time frame there. That is execution in hours. What happens to the product? If you produce and manufacture product, it goes out to the customer on the right. It goes out via transportation, a host of different modes, and you might even be replenishing some of your customers with VMI, vendor managed inventory approach. So we wanted to give you a really supply chain planning 101. With that, we'll move on and talk a little bit about the risks again. If in fact, feel free, if you can't get into the system, feel free to touch base with us via the chat. But yeah, big time elections, that's a new one. Thank you, whoever entered that. It's an area of uncertainty. In fact, a little tidbit. Around the globe, there will be 60 countries going through major elections this year. That provides a level of uncertainty for everyone. I just wanted to give you that little tidbit. All right.
Yeah, it's the highest they say that they've ever seen in a year for a long time. So it's
for a good long time. You bet.
So that is causing a lot of stagnation, as I call it, stagnation in decision making. That's my nobody can make a decision because we got to wait for this. We got to wait for that. So if you're feeling that, raise your hand and say, yes, you're feeling that. Are you feeling indecisions in your executive leadership? I'd love to hear feedback on that. Please enter in the chat. With that, we'll move on.
We started out with talking about what ChatGPT sees out there on the wonderful world of the internet. I think they got a pretty good smattering of strategic, tactical, and operational risks. What we're going to delve into now is what you can do now and support it with a couple of case studies, and then get into valuable takeaways. All right, so that's where we're going. We'll start you here with a couple of quick hit strategies to identify, assess, and mitigate risks. Let's take a look at 3 basic types of risks. 1, strategic at the top. What are those? Geopolitical, like ChatGPT said, infrastructure in different countries, the weather, Mother Nature. We don't control these things. We'd love to, but we can't. All right. So what do we advocate? Maybe you think about and leverage something called a risk alert system. We will talk about them in a couple of minutes. Maybe start getting a robust risk dialogue going between your peers and or the executive team, and maybe even think about business continuity planning. We will talk a little bit more in detail on every one of these action items. Second type of risk, tactical. That has to do with your customers and your suppliers. These are risks outside of your four walls. They're still out there, but their customers and suppliers are connected to your supply chain. Think about something called the Altman Z-score. We're going to share insights on that. Financial health reporting. There's watch lists to help you maintain visualization on suppliers and customers and alternative supplier or alternative sourcing. And then finally on the bottom, third type is operational. These are what we affectionately call chronic risks within your supply chain. They happen every day, every shift, every hour. So how would you mitigate them? Well, think about supply chain planning, maybe what we call FMEA, failure mode effect analysis methodology, and even some lean Six Sigma approaches. So with that, we're going to talk more about these. And what I'm going to do is turn it over to Jim, and he's going to start us off.
So what we've done is we put together a list of what you can do now. And when you add them all up, there's about 12 of them. We're going to start off with a supply chain management maturity assessment. Greg will go into that and the Altman Z scores. Then we're going to get into financial health reports done by third parties and alternate sourcing. Then we'll get into supply chain mapping and business continuity planning. And then we'll get into the risk alert systems. And there's a number of third-party risk providers out there that can help you with that. And then just some tidbits that we're not going to get into any details now. You can buy supply chain risk insurance, something that you should be looking into if you're not already doing. Then there is a first-of-a-kind strategic risk simulation modeling tool from SMC Blocks. Actually, we will be covering that in a webinar next week. There's watch lists, the dark web, and the FMEA methodology Greg just mentioned, as well as leveraging Lean Six Sigma teams, close to my heart, being a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. So the ones in green here, we're going to go and provide you with a definition, how to get started, benefits, and a case study. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We wanted to provide you with, let's say, a good starting point. And to us, it's supply chain process maturity. We do have, as Jim said, a supply chain process maturity assessment tool. It's out there. We'll get to the link in a minute, which includes 13 tenets. And we wanted to just give you a grounding of those tenets, how the assessment tool is structured. All right. So you can see the graph on the left. That's an actual graph coming out of a client answering the 13 tenet questions. What are the tenets? Let's go left to right. We break them out into strategic, tactical, and operational. We have three tenets within strategic. Their leadership, how does your leadership operate? Balanced scorecard, we think that's very important. We think that's a great framework. And then intentional redundancies relative to your plants, if you manufacture, and or your suppliers and contractors. In the middle, we have the tactical. We have 5. They are demand management. They're industry nuances, information systems. We don't ask you to name the vendor. It's how sophisticated and comprehensive and connected are they? Do you think about supply chain from end to end, customers to suppliers and back? And do you do any risk mitigation planning? These are all questions of discovery. And finally, from an operational point of view, there's 5 more. We look at your supply chain processes, especially for service organizations. What does your supply base look like? We ask questions about, do you have an S&OP process? How do you do logistics? Do you have your own? Do you have 3PLs? And how agile is your supply chain process? So net, it's kind of an assessment of your performance from a maturity point of view and your process point of view, and it provides an identification or visualization of your strengths, weaknesses, all aligned to the three elements we call strategic, tactical, and operation. All right, so with that, we'll move into the actual tool. This is what it looks like. It's essentially an assessment tool online. All right. It's got 13 tenets. If you look at the chart, you can see the tenets from leadership at 12 o'clock all the way down around the clock until you get back to leadership and agility. There's 13 tenets. There's adaptive manufacturing at 9 o'clock. If you're a manufacturer, there's two tools. One, we mentioned for manufacturing, if you manufacture a product, and the other is if you're a logistician and you move material back and forth, but you don't manufacture. So what does it measure? It measures two things: the maturity of your supply chain processes within those tenets and inherent risk. All right. How do you read it? The closer your black line, the black line indicates answers to all the questions by process. The closer that black line is to the middle of the chart, that's much more mature processes and much less risk. The farther away you are from the center, the less mature your processes are and the higher the inherent risk. All right. So we normally like to ask the questions on the left. Where do you think you are on the supply chain maturity model curve? What inherent risks do you have in your supply chain? Is your supply chain flexible? This essential free outcome gives you a good starting point. And then the question is always, how mature are your supply chain processes? And once you get an answer, what can I do? All right. So we wanted to give you a sense of the tool, and it's free. Right. So next, we're running through these mitigation approaches. Next is something a bit different. Supplier bankruptcy predictors. They're out there. We wanted to share this one with you. It's called the Altman Z-score. What is it? Well, it's a series of weighted ratios for public and private firms. It has better than a 90% accuracy rate in predicting bankruptcy anywhere from 12 to 15 months into the future, and 75% accuracy in predicting bankruptcy 2 years in advance. All right. 2 attributes, and there's only 4 to 5 ratios needed. It provides you a single score with a green, yellow, and red status. It's somewhat of a heat map. We call it the poor man's financial supplier dashboard. Let's take a look. There's 2 calculations. First calculation is for public companies. All right. You can take a look at the algorithm there in the middle. All right. What do you need? You need 2 big things: an income statement and balance sheet. That's what you need. You can get that from any public company. Once you get that, you can see the ratios, and then you probably are well versed on all the definitions, working capital, and so forth. You just follow your nose and make the calculations. The net is you get a Z-score. For public companies, Z-score less than 1.8, you're in the red zone. Very, very likely that this company's got a problem financially. A Z-score between 1.8 and 3 for public healthcare, you're in the yellow zone. There's some risk concern. A Z-score greater than 3, pretty green, pretty solid. This is for public health or public companies. There's a second calculation, a little different because private companies are forced to report differently, report their financials. The ratios are different, but the calculations from an income statement and balance sheet are still there. All right, the net Z-scores are different for private. Z-score less than 1.1, you're in the red zone. You got to watch that supplier. Z-score between 1.1 and 2.6, you're in the yellow zone. and a Z-score greater than 2.6, you're green, you're good to go. We advocate you do this every quarter if you can. It's a poor man's financial reporting on your suppliers. Let's take a look at a use case. All right. This is a use case of the Altman Z-score from one of our long-standing consortium members. They are called Rapid Ratings. They are out of New York City. And I just wanted to share with you what they can and what they normally do for their clients. They are fee for service. But take a look on the second column on the left. They profiled for us sectors, industry sectors. You can take a look at it when you receive the deck. All right. All those sectors. And then on the top, they have a legend. All right. And the legend is red to blue. Red indicates very high risk score according to their calculations. Blue, very low risk score. And then you can see that they do this on a quarterly basis over time, and you can see the color coding. All right. So what's the net here, folks? The benefit is down the bottom, time. If you can do this on your own or you solicit Rapid Ratings, it can provide you anywhere from 12 to 18 months to secure an alternative supplier if in fact one of your key suppliers turns from blue to green, yellow, orange, and red. All right. That's what we wanted to share with you. All right. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. So we covered the first two highlights. The third highlight is to look at financial health reports. This is third-party data. Some of the best data you can get out there is, through the legal, civil, criminal filings and the courts, 53% of the data. The next is risk and compliance through geopolitical, OSHA, labor actions, diversity. This is all free public information. The next is watch list and blacklists from the national and international perspective. And then there's sanctions, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, the National Association of Security Dealers, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and so forth. These are all sources of third-party data, and this is what the folks like Rapid Ratings look for in the different suppliers and your customers to look at the financial health of your key parts of your supply chain. So again, sources of financial information that you can get out there is, of course, those annual reports. If it's a publicly held company, D&B, credit reports, third-party rating agencies, Moody's, of course, has been around for a long time, and of course, trade journals and supplier-provided data. So you can look at, are folks being involved in what they used to be involved in? Are they stopping their publications? They used to be very public, now they're turning inward. Any of these types of changes are indicators that these vendors or customers are at risk or at financial risk because they're cutting back. Of course, layoffs if they announce them, and so an existential risk event is certainly going to cause a challenge for them. So again, you're trying to identify those customers. So Rapid Ratings, as Greg mentioned, they're our partner here with the consortium, and the case study that they have shown is why. What are the risks? Your risks are really your supplier risks. So your supplier risks, third party are going to turn into your risks, and that's why you want to manage third party risks. You are financially responsible for these third parties, the regulatory requirements, and there's operational best practices around this. So this case study goes into great detail of 87% of firms have experienced a disruptive risk event in the last 3 years. 75% of firms experienced a supply chain disruption in the past year, and 50% of all supply chain disruptions came from tier 1 suppliers. So when we're talking about estimates, this is 1 to 3 million. It's much even higher now in these days. So, you know, identify who your third parties are. They come in all shapes and sizes, as it shows there: suppliers, vendors, partners, consultants. Everybody has some kind of financial health rating, and that's what Rapid Ratings does for you. So taking a deeper dive, you can look at who is your third party vendors, understanding their financial health, and independently assess their financial health ratings. Some do's and don'ts here, I think, are good takeaways on the far right. You know, the do's, use actual financial statements, evaluate public and private suppliers on the same basis, including customers, include fourth party evaluations also. The don'ts: don't rely on just looking at your payment history. Oh, they're paying on time, so they're not at risk. That's not a leading indicator. That's a lagging. It's kind of too late when they can't pay the bills. Rely on market segment and stock prices. So that's a lot of hearsay. By the time it gets there, it's too late. You probably have already lost out on that. And accept, incomplete information. If you don't have that information, you need to dig. So again, the benefits are identifying vendors and customers that are at risk, financial risk due to an existential event. And again, our Rapid Ratings partner provides a great tool for you. The next area that we want to cover is the alternate suppliers. So this is the fourth. So reasons why companies explore alternate suppliers, of course, is diversification of risk, pricing and competition, design flexibility, business continuity, and delivering logistics. Of course, when you have more suppliers, if you're trying to take cost out of your supply chain, you say, I want to reduce the number of my suppliers. But if you reduce them so that you have no alternate, when you do have a risk event, you put yourself at fantastic risk. And we'll give you a case study here in a minute. But looking at leading risk indicators to identify where you need alternate suppliers, just pick out a couple of these. The suppliers shipping early due to lack of business. So when suppliers are calling you and saying, hey, can you take this early? That's a red flag, right? If a supplier has reduced its investment in R&D and IT equipment or resources, if you see that they're cutting down, or you hear that they're cutting back, or they were planning a large expansion and all of a sudden they stop it, those are all things that you're looking at for risk. If there's a lot of turnover in the executive level, or the people that you're working with are changing periodically and they're on a 6 to 12 month revolving door, that's not good. If the suppliers restating financial reports continually, and if there's an unusual amount of money stock being sold, of course, by the executives, that's kind of something almost too late at that point in time, but that you definitely want to be looking for another supplier at that time. So again, it protects the ability to manufacture your SKUs and your product line to meet your demand, so you're not being dragged down by your suppliers and or customers. So here's a case study. The case study that we put together, that we will be going in next week with SCM Blocks with Chris White. You have the $100,000 funds availability. Let's say that's your run rate, and you're humming along month over month, but all of a sudden you have a risk event. And scenario one is you lose a supplier and you're dependent on that supplier, and you shut down your line. Now you can't deliver that SKU. So that's this green line here. So there you're going to lose quite a bit, right? You're going to lose like in $120,000 over 60 weeks here, over a year or so. So that's scenario one. Scenario 1A is, well, let's just say that happened, but you were able to find a supplier, and after 16 weeks, now you have to qualify that supplier. They come on board, and you may only lose $36,000. But of course, you might have lost volume coming out of that from your customer if they're willing to wait for you. because they may go to a new supplier other than you. And then the other scenario two is in the dotted line here. In scenario, the final scenario is if you have an alternate supplier, you're only going to lose like in the order of $120,000. You're not going to lose much at all because you're able to recover right away. So this is going to be a case study that we're going to show in the next webinar, and these are scenarios that you can run on N tier. So if you have a second tier, third tier supplier, we can run through different scenarios. So Chris has a simulation tool that can look into that. So very exciting. With that, Greg?
You bet. You bet. We're going to keep moving forward here. We want to have a quick discussion on what we call end-to-end supply chain mapping. All right. We'll just get you grounded quick with this picture. Then we'll move into the tactics. But if you're a manufacturer, let's start up at the top. If you're a manufacturer, you probably have product design and engineering at 12 o'clock up the top. Then just go around the supply chain in clockwise order, and you can see all the elements that we actually talked about to a certain extent within the 13 tenets of the supply chain assessment tool. If you manufacture, you probably have all these elements going around the clock clockwise. If you're a logistician group, yes, you're not going to be manufacturing, you're not going to be making things. So there are a few elements within this end-to-end supply chain that won't be meaningful to you. And that's why we actually have two different assessment tools, one for manufacturing and one for logistician or service organizations. So with that, let's take a look at supply chain mapping. Just the tactics, a picture profile, and a little bit of a discussion on what to do. All right. So the next slide is a bit busy, but it gives you a perspective on what we call supply chain risk mapping. I'll just go through real quick. You can look at it. I'll walk you through. We advocate going through this exercise as a first step to supply chain risk and resiliency. So what do? You can take a look at all the elements. First, pick a small product line. If you manufacture something or not, pick a small product line that you manage that maybe has 8 to 10 stock keeping units. Next, get everyone who touches the product line into a room. Then you begin to draw the supply chain nodes like you see on the slide, from customers on the right to suppliers on the left and everything in between. All right, warehouses, DCs, even outsourced contractors and so forth. What do you do next? Then connect those nodes with lines and perhaps even use arrows to indicate the flow of material. Next, you identify the risks that have occurred in this product line and what could occur, and those risks are up top there. We just took 9 as an example. All right. So then what do you do next? Once you have the risks identified, people talk about it. Yes, we had a lead time issue at this particular contractor and so forth. Good dialogue, away you go. What do you do next? You superimpose those risks onto the nodes where they occurred or could occur. Are you done? No. But now everyone who touches the product line has an appreciation for the supply chain and its risks. All right. Next, outside of this mapping exercise, which normally takes a good half a day, folks, you then assess those risks. And here's a use case. We wanted to give you a quick use case on who does supply chain mapping. All right. This is Cisco. Everybody knows them. Been around for a while. This is a Chinese earthquake back on May 2008. Within 48 hours of the earthquake, Cisco was able to conduct a full impact analysis throughout their supply chain in terms of who's affected. Within 2 days of the earthquake, they have a supply chain risk management group. They initiated a crisis survey and started talking to all those suppliers that you see on the right-hand side of the pin map. After 24 hours, the event revealed that they had 20 suppliers, as you can see, in the affected area. 2 suppliers were at risk. You can see green, blue, and red, just for illustration. 2 suppliers were at risk. Supplier X, which represented a significant revenue and risk, single sourced, and supplier Y, much smaller revenue, but had damage to its building. All right. So supplier X was already under review because Cisco overtly does intentional redundancies every day. So they had a second source available to them from supplier X. Supplier Y, Cisco has a crisis team. They were deployed, they got on an airplane, they went out and helped mitigate any production delays, and the risk was minimized. And who else goes on the crisis management team? Sorry, CFO. With what? A checkbook to assist the supplier to get back on their feet. And how do they do that without getting in trouble with the SEC? They have what they call captive insurance. They are self-insured and they can help a key supplier get back on its feet in terms of low interest loans. So we wanted to share that with you. This is all about visibility, folks. Good visibility leads to reduced time to mitigate the risk. And as we said, time in risk is money. I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Very interesting case study. With that, we'll look into BCP and business continuity planning, and we'll go through the steps of that. This is the 6th of our 7 tools that we're going to cover. First, we have to understand what's the threat. In a business continuity planning session, usually you're bringing your executives together and key personnel and supply chain, sales, finance. You bring a cross-functional group of people in the room together to try to understand what are you going to do in the time of a crisis. So what is your business continuity plan? That's what it's all about. So first, we identify the threat and identify risks through the supply chain and strategies, processes and all the people that are affected, all the organizations, within your 4 walls, within your suppliers, your customers, your end-to-end value stream, as Greg covered before. Then you look at what's the value at risk, quantify financial threats, assess the likelihood of these threats, and prioritize results with this cross-functional team. Then you look at continuity strategy. How do you make sure that you're working? So you create what we call risk registers. So what are the risks and what are you going to do? Basically, the output of an FMEA, you would say. And you develop your response plans and checklists and evaluate, well, what's the cost benefit of preparing for that risk, and are we ready? And who are the roles and responsibilities to do that? So then you work on emergency responses. What is the protocol? What is your activation? How are you going to develop communication plans for all the key stakeholders? Who needs to be involved? Internal, external, and then establish response teams, not just yourselves, but all the remote response teams that will have to be involved in this. Then you're going to test and educate. Just like anything else, you got to do drills and make sure that people are ready. So you don't just set this up and then walk away. You have to have different scenarios run periodically so that you can make sure that everybody understands their roles and responsibilities. So that's setting it up and getting it started and defining it. And some of the tactics that you would see is you're going to look on your demand side and your supply side. So you're going to be looking at your inventory buffers, your component commonality, demand shaping, range and scenario planning, postponement and final finished good steps, These are just giving you some of the mitigation tactics that you can use in order to address business continuity uh, challenges, both on the demand side and the supply side. Then there's a lot of benefits. We're not going to cover all these right now. We're giving you more information that you can take home with you and study up. So the benefits of business continuity planning. Of course, you have having a plan to restore business back to business as usual when a disruption occurs. And of course, the key here is you don't want your customer to see what's going on. Can you recover from an event and still deliver what you need to your customers? That's what you're trying to do here. There must be, you have to identify what is the key software that you have to be up and running. The company has probably some uncovered threats in its operations where it's previously unknown. So you're trying to do all this to be more proactive. So when a risk happens, so remember, when a risk event happens, whoever is able to recover the fastest between you and your competitors are going to be the ones that survive and thrive in the post catastrophic event. So there's catastrophic events that can hit you only, but they may also be hitting your competitors. So how are you going to be able to address that? Catastrophic impacts to your P&L on one risk event, and we know that even one risk event in a quarter can wipe out your entire margin, or even larger, depending on the risk event. So a case study from our friend Dave DeSenza when he was at American Express. So we thank him for sharing this case study with us. The background was he was in corporate risk management organization, and they performed the BCP exercise yearly, and they required each business unit to do it, all really good. An exercise was developed, lost a world headquarters building for 2 weeks due to a hurricane. So that was their backup. They reviewed their results, and the current plan was created, and an action plan to close those gaps. So what happened shortly after that? Something called Hurricane Superstorm Sandy hit the East Coast, if you guys remember that back in 2012. And right around Halloween, it was pretty devastating in New Jersey. And because they had a plan and exercised it with this scenario, they were able to close those gaps very quickly and to operate normally, even though they had lost their building. And the impact was the customers of the risk management organization, and by extension, all the cardholders never even knew there was a disruption. That's huge, especially when you think about Hurricane Sandy and all the people using their credit cards and trying to recover from this event. They were able to be proactive and deal with that. So that's a real success story from our friend Dave DeSenza. So again, thank you, Dave. With that,
Yep,
Greg?
you bet. Thanks. This is our last tactic, if you will. We wanted to touch base with you and talk about risk event alert systems. These are your relevant external incident alerts. So think of it this way. This is from Everbridge, a long-standing member of the consortium. They were actually called NC4, and they had been in business about 20 years. They were one of the first external risk alert systems. Think of it as your asset location plus an alert parameter that you see, a perimeter, plus an incident type where they categorize them for you, and incident severity equals risk visibility. So you can take a look at the picture, but the net is they were one of the first. They're now called Everbridge. They have over 1 million risk sources that they scan every hour. And as they scan them, you as a customer will get an electronic bitmap that is filtered that is relevant to your supply chain. And then you have the visibility almost real time to essentially identify, assess, and perhaps mitigate an external risk that that could impact your supply chain or any node in your supply chain. A little bit more on the risk event alert systems that are available to you. You can take a look. Your strategy might be maybe you build a manual data collection for your internal risks, risks that you say you can control. Many of our clients have done that. All right, nothing wrong with that. And then from the external side, you might think about maybe leasing or buying a data collection system. One of these tools, there are a few more, but it's very encouraging because these folks have spent the time and money to track and trace, to map your supply chain and give you near real-time risk alerts almost every hour. All right. So most of these are members of the consortium, long-standing members. We advocate that you should think about leasing. These are essentially, you don't have to put it on premise. They're cloud-based. You pay as you go, a pretty cost-effective approach. The benefits, it identifies an external risk so that action can be taken in almost a real-time mode. Because remember, folks, in risk, time is money. You need to identify, assess, and mitigate a risk faster than your nearest competitor, because that to us is a strategic advantage. Give you two real quick use cases. This is from company in our consortium called Rad360. What did they do? Well, they mapped a company's supply chain. You can see the lines and the nodes. Then they color code those nodes. Then they assessed the risks from at those nodes and back to back throughout each facility. And they color coded them based on red, yellow, orange, green, an algorithm associated with assessing the risks and the flow. And what would I do if I was a supply chain manager? You bet. If I believed in the algorithms and understand them, I would certainly use this as a roadmap and take a look right away at the red. What the nodes in the red and the line, the movement of material, I would do a deep dive, and I would certainly attempt to identify, assess, and mitigate the red and turn it into maybe orange, turn the orange into yellow, yellow into blue, blue into green. It's a visual roadmap of what to do first, second, or third based on the assessed risks. We have another quick one for you. This is environmental threat. This essentially is an insurance company providing their clients a heads up about in terms of a cyclone in the green red there, a cyclone approaching Southeast Asia. So what does that do? That gives those clients who have facilities in Southeast Asia 2 to 3 days to close down the facility, send people home, hunker down, and ride out that cyclone. All right. So remember, crisis management, we didn't talk about this. You're only evaluated two ways in a crisis management as a plant manager. One is did you have any injuries? And two, how fast did you recover? All right. So we wanted to share those two with you, and then we'll finish up with some dialogue on extracting valuable takeaways. So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thanks, Craig. So we hope you enjoyed going through those 7 use cases of what you can do now. If you have any questions now or after, please do send us an email or enter them into the chat. We'll be more than happy to follow up with you. Some valuable takeaways. So we always look at how does this affect your bottom line? And we have some supply chain management benchmarks from our friends at Gartner, Chainalytics, and IBF and the Hackett Group. And we looked at these particular top 7, which were in order of easiest to more difficult that we provided to you. And we said to Greg and I brainstormed, and we said, well, which of these metrics because there's lots of different revenue growth margin metrics out there. Which ones are most affected by these 7 different suggested approaches? So the first one is customer delivery, and you can see on the right what you can gain by in percentage points by moving and becoming more mature. From a capital management improvement perspective, you're talking about up to 6 points of increase in performance, fewer stockouts than your peers. You can definitely see quite a bit of movement there, moving from a laggard up through the average into the followers. And then return on capital. And right now it's freeing up cash flow. And today that's more important than ever. Cash is king, especially when high interest rates are out there. You want to get your return on capital fast and with those high interest rates. So these types of techniques are really going to help you improve your return on capital. Greg, any additional thoughts on this slide?
I just, it's pretty compelling, folks. And we use the words laggard verbiage, laggards up to leaders, but it all gets back to improving the process maturity of your supply chain, what can be achieved. So we think these are pretty compelling. It's not just us talking to you, it's our friends of the consortium sharing data from a larger database across multiple industries. So
Thanks, Greg.
yep, we wanted to close out our discussion, kind of giving you a little bit of a recap of a roadmap to resilient enterprise. So we'll kind of move through the chicane here from left to right. What did we talk about? Readiness assessment, performance capability, your as is state of maturity. Feel free to get into the free assessment. You'll get a chart. It's a good starting point. It's free. Take a look at it. Next, think about supply chain risk alerts, perhaps. All right. In risk management, speed is life and time is money. So what you don't know out there in your supply chain as an external risk can and will hurt you. Next, think about supplier financial analysis. We talked about the Altman Z-score. It's free. You can find it in Wikipedia. You got any questions? Give us a buzz. But why wouldn't you want to know 12 to 15 months into the future that your key supplier is having financial difficulty? Next, risk assessments via scenario planning. We talked about BCP. We talked about supply chain planning. Good methodologies to get started on this journey. Next, these tactics and methodologies lead to mitigation plans. Why? To be better prepared for a risk event than your nearest competitor. And finally, it leads to what? We think resilient growth. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to finish up.
Thanks, Greg. We all hope you enjoyed the webinar and we delivered on the deliverables, so to speak. And if you have any questions, please contact us on addressing the challenge of how to get started in supply chain risk. Hopefully we made you understand it can be done, and it's not going to cost an arm or a leg. You can all get started right away. And we love to hear how that's working out for you and certainly support you on that journey. Next webinar that we have is on creating growth in your company while leveraging the risk landscape. So we're kind of flipping it on its sides. We've been focused on what it can do from a cost perspective, but it also concentrating on risk can greatly have an incredible impact on your top line growth. The companies that do it well are the companies that continue to grow. And that's very obvious by the exemplars that we hear about every day. With that, we thank all of you again for joining us today. We welcome any feedback at any time. about what we can do better, and if there's other topics you would like to see us cover, please let us know. Greg, your closing comments?
You bet. Hopefully, we provided you with a host of insights in terms of what you can do now to identify, assess, and mitigate supply chain risks in order to do what? Build a resilient enterprise. So thanks a lot for attending, and all the best, folks.
Thanks, Greg. And just a few last words is, there's systematic ways to proactively manage risk, and those risks can wipe out your whole margin for your company, just one risk event. So there's some very salient approaches that we believe that you can take today, and they have been proven to help companies avoid that pitfall of being one of those watch list companies. So we hope that you enjoyed the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks so much.